We're going to be circulating to every pastor in the country, to every Christian leader, and we're going to get them to either sign off or give us a statement why they don't want to sign it. But let me just read this to you. First crisis, a crisis of courage. The failure of Christian leaders to address the great crises of our times with clarity and boldness. Number two, a crisis of a lack of moral excellence in the church. This robs us of our moral authority. A crisis of Christian disengagement from our civic responsibilities. This has robbed the world of the salt and light we're called to be. And number four was a crisis of the church's lack of preparation for the inevitable disasters and crises of our times. And this is becoming increasingly expensive in both lives and resources. Now, these are general. But, the very first group that gets thrown in the lake of fire in the book of Revelation are the cowards. And we believe, we've been meeting with political leaders and our nation's leaders in many areas for a long time, and they're wondering where the church is. They would have more courage to speak out if they heard church leaders speaking out more.
Right, yes.
And I believe we've got to set the tone.
You know it's true.
Yeah. So we don't want to point the finger at them when we're not doing our job.
Right, yes, amen.
So we've resolved together, we are speaking out. The ones gathered around this table have been speaking out in a major way. I don't feel like they're the ones necessarily guilty of this, but we're all guilty because we identify with God's holy nation.
Yeah.
And but we've got to address these things. We've got to know them.
Absolutely.
We have a responsibility to know them. You can never defeat an enemy you don't recognize.
Yes.
That's a basic military principle. If you can't see your enemy, you can never defeat him. And there's a lack of clarity about who the enemy is.
That's true.
And I think there's the same lack of clarity of who the enemy is in the church.
Wow.
And we're just continually to cave into political correctness and to all kinds of other pressures and fearful of many things. Now, that's changing. Many are standing up. More and more are standing up and becoming bold. They're also coming under the conviction that they have to understand these times. Now, I think for our country to have not seen ISIS coming and not to see the threat that we're under in this country now, because we're not sealing our borders, many other reasons, but to me this is either the greatest naivety I think ever in history of leaders, or it is treason. I don't see anything in between those two. We're being sold out. And there's a mountain of evidence to go with either one of those. You could still pick, but either one is wrong, because if you take a position of responsibility, you are required to be competent for that position. And we've got people that are not competent in their positions of defending us, and we're going to pay a terrible price for this. One friend of ours who is in a position to know told me just a few days ago, and he did it on camera, that he's also in the position to have the figures. He said that more than half of those crossing our southern border right now are what are called OTMs, other than Mexicans, and the great majority of them are of Middle Eastern descent.
Wow.
Oh, my God.
Why are they coming across our border like this? They're all over the country right now.
We don't know it? Our
We
leaders
do know
don't,
it. Our people do know it.
Our
They're
leaders
screaming.
know it?
Some know it, and they're crying out now. This was one of the most encouraging things to me. I've recently went up to Washington for a couple of meetings and a round table up there that was mostly political leaders, intelligence officers, several of those who are likely Republican presidential candidates were in. It's just about 25 of us at this thing, and I've never left Washington encouraged before. I've always left discouraged. This is bad.
Sure.
I have to admit, I left after 2 days of being up there encouraged.
Really?
That was shocking.
That is it is shocking. Tell us why.
Yeah.
Why? Can
Well,
you tell us?
You know, there are some basic issues
Yeah.
that we've got to understand if you're going to understand the times. And one of them is Islamic jihadism. You have to understand that
You really do.
if you're going to understand these times.
Yeah.
And I've been up there so many times where I didn't feel like anybody got it, except Michelle Bachmann, a few others. And this time, I went to a breakfast first. And General Boykin, our friend, was the main speaker, all for congressmen and senators. And they not only got it, they got it with a depth that was shocking to me.
Wow.
Wow.
And then we had that round table, and it was the same thing. They not only got it, they got it with such depth and with such conviction and with such wisdom of how to deal with it.
Good.
I was just stunned. I said, I can't believe this transformation has happened since the last time I was up there. Same people, and it's spreading fast. And I attribute it to General Jerry Boykin for the most part. For 2.5 years, you know, he retired from the military as a lieutenant general after being in some of our worst battles and all, but he hasn't quit fighting.
Thank God.
And he despises living in Washington. He just doesn't like, he'd rather be in the country.
Sure.
But he's still fighting the fight on the front
People
lines.
with a calling never give up.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't
That's right.
stop.
Yeah,
It's not a job, it's a calling.
exactly. And
That's it.
Jerry's fighting as hard as he ever did when he was in uniform.
Yeah.
And he spent 2 or 3 days every single week just meeting with congressmen, meeting with senators, meeting with committees, educating them. And all I can say, it has paid off hugely. Now, there are others. Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy, doing the same thing. Years and years of almost no one listening to him, calling them fear mongers, everything else. Now everybody's starting to listen. So I think that's a model for all of us. Now, we got to do the same thing in the church. We should be leading the way.
That's
They
so
should be
true.
running to us for
That's
this.
it. And we have
Yeah.
to be educated.